Hello and welcome to the third tutorial where we will be building the classical Hello World example application. In the process we will be learning about request response cycle or request response message exchange pattern. We will be learning about MVC architecture and more specifically about controllers and their responsibilities in the MVC architecture and more specifically in the Spring framework. We're going to be learning about URL paths, path variables, request parameters, and curl. So let's get started. So basically, the request response cycle can be demonstrated with a very simple diagram. We have client and server that are usually two different computers. In some cases, it could be the same computer. And the client is going to send a request to the server. The server is going to process the request, maybe call a database, maybe perform some action, and return the response back to the client. So in the example of a web application, maybe the client is our web browser that is making a request to Google server to get the home page. The server is going to call some database, do some magic, and when it's done, it's going to return a response to our web browser that is going to render that web page. So we're in this tutorial, we're going to do something very similar. So what we're going to do is from our web browser, which is going to be the client, we're going to send a request to our server, and our server is going to run on the same machine, but it could be running over the internet on a server in a different country. It doesn't really matter. The same principles apply. And that server is going to return some response. And in that case, it's going to be hello world and some variations of it, as you will see. So let's get started. So I have in here my IntelliJ project running. I will start by running the database. So I will open the terminal and then I will do a docker compose up to start the database. And once that is started, I will also start my to-do application. And if we inspect the logs, we will see that the server is running on port 8080. And that's basically the default server that Spring is going to run on if we don't configure it differently. So let's see if we can do something with that server. So if we go to localhost colon 8080, let's see what we're gonna get. Okay, and it seems that we're getting an error, and that's very expected because we haven't coded anything yet in our server. So right now it's saying that it's not found. It doesn't really know what to send back to the client. And it's also sent an HTTP status code of 404. And status codes are very important. So basically, if you go back to this diagram, the response consists mainly of two parts. The first one is the response body, and it could be basically text, it could be HTML, it could be XML, it could be the video, it could be a binary stream, it could be a lot of different things. And we also have the status code, and the status code is just a number that mean different things. So 404, for example, means not found. 200 means successful. 500 means internal server errors. You can Google a list of HTTP status codes, and you will get basically the most common status codes and when they are used and so on and so forth. Probably don't need to remember them by heart, at least not the uncommon ones. The common ones you will be very familiar with them without even trying, because you will see them in your everyday work. So let's fix this problem. Let's tell the server what to render when the client asks for the home page. So if we go back to IntelliJ and let's go to source main Java and basically let's create a package to keep things clean and tidy. So let's create a hello package, and in here we're gonna create a new class. And the class responsibility that we are going to create is to basically handles the client requests and return appropriate responses. And such classes in the model view controller architecture in the Spring world are usually called controllers. And the convention for naming these controllers is just the name of the resource or the name of the thing that the controller is going to be responsible for, and then the suffix controller. So here we have our hello controller. So in here, let's just write the simple function that return the string hello world and see how we can wire it to get it to work as a web request response handler. So the method is basically going to return a string. Let's call it hello for simplicity. And basically we're going to return hello world. So right now we have the method, we have the class, but Spring doesn't really know how to wire things together. So we need to tell it a little bit more. Spring is very smart, but not smart enough to know that we mean that this method should handle the requests, that this class is responsible for handling requests and responses to begin with. So to do that, we need to provide extra information to Spring. And the way we do that is using annotations. So first we need to tell it that this is a controller. So what we're gonna do is add the REST controller annotation to the class. So right now, Spring knows that this class is a controller, that it is going to handle web requests and returns web responses. But it doesn't really know what this method does. So we need to map HTTP requests to this method. So the way we do it is using a method annotation called request mapping. And this annotation is going to take a string, which is basically which URL path is going to be mapped to this method. So in this case, we're going to use the /, and the / basically means the home path. So right now, if we restart our server, let's stop it and rerun it. And hopefully, if we restart, we're gonna get hello world. Okay, awesome. Let's see if we can make it a bit more interactive. So in this case, it's just like returning a static string, which is interesting, but not very interesting. Let's see if we can return a personalized greeting, for example. So we're gonna have a method that's also gonna return a string, but it's gonna be hello person, and it's gonna take the person name, and what it's gonna do is just gonna return hello and whatever the name of that person is. And in here, what we are going to do is we're gonna tell it that this is a request mapping, and it is going to, let's choose the path, let's call it hello person for simplicity. So right now, if we go to hello person, we should be getting hello plus the name. But the problem is Spring doesn't know where does this parameter come from. So let's restart it and show you what I mean. So if we go to hello person, it's gonna say hello null. Why is that happening? It's happening because Spring doesn't know where does this parameter come from. So to solve that problem, we have a number of different options, but let's start by experimenting with path variables. So how about passing in the person name inside the URL itself? So adding a / and then basically any name. So right now it's telling us that the page is not mapped because we don't have any controller method that handles that kind of requests, but let's build it. So the path is going to be hello person, and then in here we're going to define a path variable. And the way we do it is just use curly braces, and then in here we define the name of the path variable. And in this case, I'm gonna just call it name. And it's very important that the name variable up here matches the name in the parameter list. That is not gonna be enough actually. We're gonna need to do one extra step, which is to add an annotation for that parameter to tell Spring that that parameter comes from this path variable. And the way we do that is using the path variable annotation. So we just add path variable annotation before the parameter, and right now Spring is going to map all the requests that follows this format to this method, and is going to pass in whatever the name variable value that the client has provided to the method, and then we are going to write that out in here. So I actually forgot to restart the application. Let's do that. So now that we have restarted the application, let's see if this is going to work. And yes, it seems to be working. So right now if we provide any variable name or any path variable value, it is basically going to work. So that's one way of passing in parameters, but as you can imagine, sometimes you want to provide more than one value. And so there must be a more powerful way to do it that allow us to pass in more than one value. And indeed there is, and it is basically request parameters. And you've probably, if you have looked at URLs, sometimes you might see it like at YouTube or something like that. You will see dollars question sign followed by a list of variables. And these are basically request parameters, and they have the following format. So after hello person, we usually have a question sign. So after the path, this is basically the path, the first part after the domain is called the path, and then you basically have the query string. And in here, after the question sign, you can pass in key value pairs separated by and signs. So it could be key 1 equal to value 1, and then and key 2 equal to value 2, and so on and so forth. So let's try to use that to create the third endpoint, That is going to be hello person age endpoint. I'm very creative with naming, I know, bear with me. And that method is just gonna return hello plus the name plus the age, or something like that. So public string hello person age, and it's going to take, as you said, the name, and the age probably gonna be an integer, so age, and we're gonna return hello plus name plus your age is plus age. By the way, this is really, really, really insecure. So using this way, we should be validating the user input. Otherwise, we will be basically creating vulnerabilities in our application. There's something called cross-site scripting. So the user might be sending, instead of their name, they could be sending malicious code that basically can affect other users. So we usually validate and sanitate the user, but for this hello world example, we won't be doing that. But in real world applications, we usually do that. And we're probably going to learn about it later. So let's begin by defining a request mapping where we specify which path is going to correspond to this method. So yeah, hello person age. And as you can guess, it's not gonna know that this name is going to come from the query parameters, as I've said. We need to add annotations to explicitly specify for Spring what is the source of these variables. And the annotation that we are interested in is basically request param. And the same in here, request param. I guess you also need to specify, let's see. Let's restart it first. And hello person age, and here the name is going to be Aham, and the age, I'm not going to give my true age, let's go for 100. Yeah, it seems to be working. Hello Aham, your age is 100. Actually, it's lying, but however. Yeah, so the important thing is here is to remember to have the same variable name as the query key you're going to put in here, and the same age as you have in here, and that's going to work. So that's basically it. So that's the request response cycle in a nutshell. So our web browser is sending a request to Spring. Spring is scanning through our classes, looking for classes that are controllers, and then it is looking for the request mapping annotations, and it is routing the request to the correct method, and it's taking the input either from the path variable or the request parameter and passing it into the method. And our method could do a lot of different things. So it could be like fetching things from database, calling other external APIs, and it doesn't have to be returning strings. It could be returning binary data. It could be returning music files. It could be returning JSON. It could be returning a lot of different things, but the same principles apply. So with that said, there's actually a different way that we can interact with our API, which you might find a bit more fun than using the web browser if you like the terminal, which is using curl. So curl is a very, very common command line tool. I think it's invented, created, and maintained by a very popular and smart Swedish programmer. I don't remember the name of that person, but he's extremely smart. So the way we use it is that we just open the terminal, type curl, and then we type the URL that we are going to request. So in this case, it's going to be localhost 8080, which is the default port for Spring applications. And then let's try the home page, which is this one. So this one should return hello world. And indeed, as you can see, it's returning hello world. Let's try the hello person endpoint. So hello person, and then in here we can pass in some name, and indeed it's returning hello some name. And let's try the person and age combination. So that one is hello person age, and then we have the question mark, name equal to some name, and age equal to 200. That's a bit too high, actually. Let's try a 50. And in here we seems to be facing a problem. I don't know what I typed wrongly. No match found. Z shell. Oh, yeah. We need to wrap this thing inside curly braces. Otherwise, it will think that these are Linux commands. And as you can see, it seems to be working. Hello, some name, your age is 50. So that's basically everything for this tutorial. So see you next time.